right. Well, hopefully that got you just a little bit inspired for our session today. I just would love to introduce myself. I am Julianne Hemingway, and welcome again to the Microsoft 365 Essentials for End Users, Part 2. We'll be focusing on Teams meetings today. All of those options and features that you may or may not be aware of. We're going to go through those and hopefully help you prepare, run, and follow up on your meetings in a little more effective way. So I, again, am Julianne Hemingway. I'm based in Annapolis, Maryland, just a little bit east of Washington, D.C. So I'm here in the States, and I am both an executive director of the USA entity and also a productivity coach here at Storyals. I have been doing this for quite some time now, and I absolutely love it. I love engaging and helping all of the end users feel more comfortable with all of the Microsoft 365 applications. And here at Storyals, you may or may not be aware, but that's what our focus is. Our focus is helping users throughout their organizations feel more comfortable with the Microsoft 365 applications, and even Copilot, if you happen to have either the Copilot license with your Microsoft or if you have the paid version. But today, of course, we're just going to focus on the Microsoft 365 applications itself and the applications you can really take advantage of in Teams. And with me, I have a few colleagues with me. I have Sanda, our marketing manager. She's here helping us out today. And I also have my co-host. I have Midhun here, and I will pass it off to him so he can introduce himself to you.
Thank you, Julia. Hi, my name is Midhun Manoharan. I am the technical service manager at Storyals. I'll be monitoring the chat, launching a few polls, and doing a few demos. And maybe if you have any technical questions, I can answer that.
Oh, and he's being
All right.
modest. He's also going to help give us some extra tips and tricks too along the way. He's quite the expert. He's underestimating his knowledge. And just quickly, I'll just do a quick tech check before we begin. So if you can see and hear us, maybe use those reactions and give us a thumbs up reaction. And if for some reason you can't hear us or you have any issues, I put a little screenshot there just in case you could see how you can make sure that you're using the right audio device. I always find that quite often if I move my laptop around, I've forgotten to plug in my headset or it's not Bluetoothed. So it's always good just to have that as a setup. Great. Well, thank you for the thumbs up. It was great. I'm glad to get some interaction. We're going to talk a lot about that today. So as I said, this is part 2 in the series. In part 1, we covered the Microsoft 365 basics with document collaboration. If for some reason you missed it, you can watch it on demand. We're going to post the link of how you can access that in the chat. But also we have a session 3 that will be coming up on November 12th. So we wanted to make sure that you mark your calendars. We'll be sending out the invite for that also, and we'll also post it in the chat here. What we'll also do is we do have a pretty good idea of what we'd like to cover, but at the end, we're going to ask, and we'll be launching a poll to see what would be interesting for you. We'd love to hear more from our users. That's how we like to put these webinars together so that we are giving you the best information that will help you. So our plan today is to help look at, preparing for your meetings like a pro. Things we'll look at are things like agenda, breakout rooms, different types of meetings, whether you use Teams or Outlook to actually schedule and create your meetings. Talk a little bit about the roles of co-organizers and organizers. We'll also look at when you're running your meeting. What are some things that you can think about to make sure that you have the best meeting that you can and the most engaged meeting? So we'll look at the different ways of sharing, presenter modes, things like PowerPoint Live, Excel Live, Live Whiteboard. We'll even actually pull up a live whiteboard and get some participation here in our current webinar. And we'll also look at, engaging the participants. So what are things that you can do to help get engagement in your meetings? We'll look at things like reactions, which we just used, polls, again, whiteboard, and then also looking at chat controls and some things that you can do ahead of time to make sure that everyone's fully engaged. And then finally, we'll focus on follow-up. We always think, gosh, we have all these meetings back to back. What's the best way to follow up on those meetings and make sure that you've hit all of those tasks that you assigned? Look at, the notes that were taken and how you're able to kind of follow up on that with your colleagues. So while we're doing this, as Midhun mentioned earlier, he's going to be launching a few polls, and Sanda and he will also be keeping an eye on the chat. I'll lead some of the walkthroughs, and of course, if questions come up, feel free to raise your digital hand or throw something in the chat, and we'll do our best to make sure that we get them answered while we're in this session. So just to get things started, we're going to start with a poll. So Midhun's going to launch a quick poll, get a little bit of engagement early in the call. So he's going to launch a poll to look at what's your biggest current challenge with Teams meetings right now. So you can select multiple if you'd like, or select one. And what we'll do is we'll kind of use this as a basis, and we'll hopefully be able to focus a little more on some of these areas where you might be wondering if you can get more data and have a better meeting. Great, I'm seeing some good responses come in. And if you haven't used polls before, we will talk a little bit more about them as we go through this webinar, but also you can see, it's nice to be able to see on the screen real live what the results are. Great, I think most of you are like myself, that technical setup and follow-up. Perfect. We'll be focusing a lot on both of those things. So that's great. Thank you so much for your responses. It's really helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and start with, when you need to schedule your meeting, there's so many different things we need to think about. So a lot of times there's so much thought, we're so quickly to be able to we need to get that meeting scheduled. And a lot of times we forget about some of the things you really want to think about before. So the first thing is kind of how do you schedule that meeting? Do you do that in Outlook? Do you do that in Teams? And they both have great options, but sometimes you need to use Teams instead of Outlook. So for example, if I'm in Outlook, I can only create a Teams meeting, or of course a face-to-face meeting. I can always schedule that, or of course a hybrid meeting where you have some people in the office and you have others who are meeting online. And this is fantastic, especially if you're already working in Outlook. But a lot of times you might need to have a different kind of meeting, maybe something similar to, you might have a town hall or a webinar, and we'll look at that also. But one of the things I wanted to pull out as kind of a pro tip, always make sure you put as best as you can, the most descriptive line you can in the subject line. And that's really helpful to make sure, we're all invited to lots of meetings, and it's really good to be able to look at that subject and get a good view of what that meeting's regarding. So as you can see, you have you can also, of course, add your agenda, and you can do that in Outlook, and you can add a loop component and then add your agenda. Additionally, if you go over to Teams, this gives you a little more control. So if I want to add a new meeting here, I can add a meeting that will give a descriptive line. And one of the key things that you can do here that I really like that you can do in Teams is built into the invite, they have an agenda template loop component. So if I click on this, and again, unfortunately at this moment in time, you can only get that agenda template as a loop component in a Teams calendar invite. But this allows me then to put that very important agenda, because not only is a good subject line important, but also giving a good agenda so your attendees know what you're going to have to talk about throughout that meeting. And at least having a light agenda is really helpful. So as you can see, I've got my meeting agenda, and also it gives me a spot for notes and follow-up tasks. So of course I could start adding here if I wanted to, but this will now follow me to my meeting when I actually start my meeting. And that's really important. That allows that to follow you. In addition, if you have a reoccurring meeting, this agenda will follow each meeting, and any notes that you created during your reoccurring meetings, it starts from scratch each meeting. So your notes from your previous meeting do not follow into the next meeting. You'll have a blank meeting notes section so that you can start that. But of course, this is a loop component, and we're not going to get into a lot of that in this session, but if that's important, let us know at the end. But you can always go back to the loop components that you have access to, and you would be able to then go back and look at meeting notes from previous meetings by being able to go back to that previous loop component, or of course going back to that previous meeting and looking at the recap. So I'll show a little bit more about this in just a moment. I'll give you a quick demo of what that looks like. So you can see what it looks like from a following you into your meeting. And that becomes really helpful when you need to take meeting notes. You need to make sure that you have that ability to, again, we'll focus on the follow-up. So as you can see, when I go into the meeting notes of my meeting, when I start it, my agenda that I created follows me to my meeting. And then that allows anyone that's internal to my organization to add to the notes template. But in addition, the last thing you want to do is forget about a task that gets assigned in the middle of the meeting. So this gives you the ability to actually add the tasks as you go through the meeting. And you can assign them to participants, to one or multiple participants. You can set a due date. And this immediately goes to those users' activity tab in Teams. It would go to their Microsoft To Do if they're using that application. And additionally, they get an email sent to them. So it's a great way to, on the fly in your meeting, make sure that you actually get all of these tasks assigned and that you don't forget about them. So that's just a little bit about whether you're using, Outlook or the Teams calendar to actually create your meetings. But then, of course, we have things like if we have multiple different kinds of meetings that you can actually create in your Teams environment calendar. Now, you're not able to do this in Outlook. It does have to be in Teams. And I'm just going to briefly look at a couple of them, and then I'm going to pass it over to Midhun, who's going to talk to you about some of the meeting options that you can think about, both for your Teams meetings and also briefly on what options you have for these other types of meetings. So you'll notice I'm in my Teams calendar, and of course, you may notice that it looks very similar to my Outlook calendar now. And that's an option that you can choose. If you've chosen that, you'll see that yours will resemble my Teams environment calendar. But you can also keep the old version, I'll call it, or classic version of your Teams calendar. So that's completely up to you. But if I click New Event, as you probably most likely do, this just creates that Teams meeting that we normally get that you can also do in Outlook. But if you click the drop-down menu, now all of ours might be just a little bit different, but of course you have a channel meeting, a webinar, which is for much larger groups where you're hosting and you have presenters and organizers and people managing the chat. You also have a town hall, a live event. So these are just a few of the other types of Teams meetings that you can have. And each one of them is for a different set of users and a different type of meeting that you might be having. And we could talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to Midhun, and he's going to give us an overview of some of the meeting options that we should really think about before we start the meeting. So Midhun, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. So let's get to an example. Here we have in our demo environment, meeting invite. I'm just going to quickly go to the meeting options. Here we go. And here are a couple options. So first and foremost, who can bypass the lobby? People in my org can guess. We would recommend if you have a large audience, like over 100 or so, keep it to only organizers and co-organizers, especially if it's external guests. But for now, in this meeting, because it's internal, it's a marketing follow-up, we keep it to people in my organization and guests. Same with who can admit from the lobby. We keep it as organizers and co-organizers. For the roles, again, in this meeting, this particular meeting right now, Julianne and Sandra are co-organizers. What they can do, they can change any of these options except cancel the meeting. So here we have choose co-organizers. You can also choose who can present. In this particular meeting, we only have organizers and co-organizers, not more. So we won't have anyone external, let's say by mistake, interrupting the meeting and presenting because we don't want them to. But the good thing is, even if you restrict, during the meeting, you can actually enable individually participants to present during the meeting. And here we have participation, allow mic for attendees. It's switched on. We can switch off, especially like I mentioned, for external parties. Sometimes individuals might forget to mute mic. You don't want to have any disturbances during a call or during a meeting. So you can enable and disable any of these. We recommend to keep them on during internal meetings and keep them off if you have over 50 or 100 individuals in a call to avoid interruptions. And here we have allow reactions and attendance reports. And yeah, and I would say these are the main options that you should look on before scheduling a meeting.
And Midhood, would you remind them just again where you got access to those meeting options?
Yeah, of course.
So if you're in Outlook or if you're in Teams, are they in different places?
They are. So right now I'm actually in Teams. So since I'm an organizer, I have access to all the options. I can go down within details. You see this option called meeting options. You can click on it and reach the meeting options. If I go to Outlook, I can switch to Outlook quickly, go to calendar. There it is. I can double click and there you go. Meeting options. All right.
Well, thank you so much, Midhood. So as you can see, there are a lot of different options that you can set. And it's really important. If it's an internal meeting, I think probably default settings is not an issue. The other thing that Midhood mentioned, and I always want to emphasize this as a best practice, is especially if you have a lot of external users, it could be multiple partners or multiple customers coming to a meeting to hear insights about maybe something new that's happening in your organization you're sharing. You always want to think about how long the chat is open. Is it open before the meeting, or before and during the meeting, or before, during, and after? And the reason I always say double check this is a lot of times you don't necessarily want the meeting chat to be open afterwards, just so that someone in the organization doesn't by accident go into the chat and maybe type something that's sensitive internally. So always think about that, especially if it's an external with external users attending the meeting. That's another one that I always kind of take a look at. And another pro tip, as we all know, Microsoft loves to throw in new features and new ways of running our meetings, and we love this. But what happens is when you have a reoccurring meeting, which is great to have for 6 months or a year, just so you don't have to think about it. But from a pro tip is, what you could do is redo the meeting every 3 months. So set it for 3 months, and then when you create the meeting, it'll then pull in all of those new features that Microsoft has available. Because if you're running on an older version that the meeting was created 6, 9, 12 months ago, a lot of times you're missing the opportunity to use some of the new features that Microsoft's enabled within the Teams meeting. So that's just a thought you might want to think about as you're going through and preparing and setting your meetings. And another thing that I really like, and I noticed that someone has done it in this meeting, so I think that's fantastic. One, you can turn on and off live captions, and you can turn those captions on to match the language that you prefer to see it in. But in addition, if you have Teams Premium, you can also turn on live captions and you can hear the voice emulated of the presenter. So if you happen to have Spanish or Italian or Swedish turned on now and you have Teams Premium, it'll be my voice, but speaking in your language. So I found that really interesting. So if you happen to be trying that, but again, something you need to enable in your meeting options. So think about the live captions, especially if you have people from other parts of the world who speak different languages. It's always really helpful. And there's another thing I'm going to pass over to Midhun, who is our technical guru. It's quite new, but there's something called voice and face recognition, and it's in your Teams settings. So he's going to show you a little bit about how you can manage this and how you can set it up. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Midhun.
Right. Thank you. So let me quickly show you from a demo account, preferably. But now the issue is I can't show you right now in this meeting because we're in a meeting right now. So I can probably show you a screenshot from the PowerPoint Live.
Yes, that's a good point, Midhun. So since you're in a meeting right now, if you do happen to go to this setting, it will be grayed out. So you can only set this up if you're not in a meeting.
So here we have the option. If you go in the settings menu, you will see at the end, you'll see something called recognition. This may be grayed out for you right now since you're in a meeting already. But once you exit the call or once this meeting gets over, I would suggest you try it, especially the voice. So if you set up voice, it will the headset. If you use the headset will recognize your voice and make sure it's only your voice that's being heard by the audience, by the other person. Because sometimes you'll have background noises, someone's maybe talking over, maybe you're sitting very close to each other in an office, someone else's voices can be picked up by the microphone. Since it does not know it's your voice or not. So, but this would avoid that. Likewise, if you have a face, if you set up face, in chances you use Teams rooms, it will recognize your face and make sure it's actually you that's speaking. And especially during and after a meeting, in case there's any recap, it knows it's okay, this so-and-so person has spoken, and this is the person who has spoken. So I would highly recommend to set this up. It's really good, especially if you have the headset. And if you have like a really, I would say a really old, not really good headset, it really helps out. Even though we would obviously recommend having a really good headset during your calls.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yes, it is great. I will tell you, I set this up sometime last week, and it does take a little bit of time. So the voice takes about 10 to 15 seconds, but the face does require, your camera on, and just like you would for a phone for face recognition, you have to, turn your face up and sideways and up and down to make sure it's got all the aspects of you. But it does work really well. So I highly recommend that, especially if you're in a large room, because it's a hybrid meeting and you have multiple people in the conference room on the call. So it's always good, something to think about. And of course, Midhun recommended the voice being really important. It also will help with that noise suppression. So to make sure that if there are other things going on in the office, so there's others walking by in the hallway, it won't pick that up, as he had mentioned. So that's really helpful. Okay, now we're going to turn to, during the meeting, a few tips that you might want to think about, especially if you're the presenter. So in an ideal world, when you're the presenter, you're able to have multiple screens, at least your laptop and an external screen. And that really helps to make sure that you have one screen dedicated to what you're sharing. And that just helps as you're going through and you're sharing that you're not accidentally, sharing your Outlook calendar or your Teams calendar, which is where you started the meeting. It also helps just give you an ease of control to quickly share and unshare as you're going through the presentation and the meeting that you're doing. In addition, you can look at things like different presenter modes. So you can have a standout or reporter mode where you're kind of put in front of what the windows that you're presenting. So that'll help kind of have the people look at you and be able to see what you're presenting at the same time. Now, unfortunately, this does not work if you are using PowerPoint Live. So you do have to think about that. But if you are just sharing a window on a screen and walking through something, or you're you're collaborating on a document, it's good you can see the person's face who's presenting. So it's always really helpful. So additionally, you can do, when you're in your PowerPoint Live, a lot of times, for example, in this situation, if I am presenting, which I will now present, or I'll actually, Midhun, I'll let you present. If you would like to make sure that when you're doing your PowerPoint Live, you want to make sure everyone's focused on the slide that you have, that you're showing. You want to make sure that they can't go forward or backwards. So what you can do is, you'll notice when you do a PowerPoint Live, there's a private mode, or private view, I apologize. And if you click on if you keep it private view, then you're not able to have users be able to go through the deck. But there are times when you think that you do want them. You want them, you're working through a document, maybe collaborating on it together, and you might want them to be able to go through the document and look at other slides. So keep that in mind depending upon the type of presentation that you're doing. And that also helps with that double screen if you happen to have it, because when you do your PowerPoint Live, you can see not only your PowerPoint, as you can see here, but any notes you can see on the right-hand side. So you can follow your slide notes. And in addition, it gives you all the tools. So you might want to be able to use the pen or the highlighter, or make sure users, you can point out specific things to them. So the PowerPoint Live is a great tool when you're presenting. So another thing that we like to talk about is really an engagement. What are ways you can engage all of your colleagues or attendees to your meeting while you're going through your meeting? We all sit in meetings quite often throughout the day, and it's hard to stay engaged sometimes, no matter how interesting it is. So we always like to give a few pro tips around a few things that you can do. The first one is, it's always great, especially if it's not a really large meeting, is to have everyone have their cameras on. Because of course, if we were all sitting in a room together, we would all be able to see each other and see your expressions as things are going on, the body language that everyone has as they're going through the meeting. And of course, as in this meeting, we love reactions. Being able to give a thumbs up, or maybe clapping for a job well done, maybe a heart, as Sanda has just done, to say, oh, that's fantastic, we really like it. Those are also ways to get engagement in the meeting. And of course, setting a few guidelines around the chat. We talked a little bit about the different options you have in your Teams meeting. So one, it's good to be able to then tell people what those guidelines are. Let them know whether or not the chat will be available after the meeting, and during the meeting, how you'd like them to use the chat. Do you want them to raise their hands if you have a question? Do you want them to put it in the chat? Is that where you want, what type of activity do you want to happen during the chat? It's good to let them know. And in addition, sometimes when you're just not feeling quite like being on camera, but you want to be involved, and you want the users and your colleagues to see. And as Sanda has done, if you can see, she's turned her avatar on. So that's another way to stay active and participate in a meeting, but not necessarily be directly on camera. So those are a few of the things you can think about. In addition, you can use Excel Live. So if you're with colleagues and you want to collaborate on a Excel spreadsheet together, you can share a live Excel spreadsheet. And you're able to do that by clicking on the share button, and you do have to scroll, but if you scroll, you'll see Excel Live, and your most recent Excel opened files will show up. Or of course, you can browse your OneDrive or your computer for the relevant file that you wanted to share with your colleagues. And then that allows them to engage in the meeting window in the Excel, so you can all see what's happening at the same time while you're watching each other in the meeting. And I think one of my absolute favorite things in a meeting to do, especially to keep engagement, is to use a live whiteboard. And I'm going to do that right now. So I'm going to pull up a live whiteboard, and you all will be able to engage in this. So even external users. And what we can do, I'm going to turn on the follow me, which means that you'll be able to follow kind of where I am, because this is, if you haven't played with whiteboard much, it's an infinite space. So you have a lot of room to put all of your thoughts. So we want to make sure that everyone can see in the meeting where the activity is happening. So you'll notice at the bottom of your meeting screen in this whiteboard, you have a bunch of tools, but you'll see a little sticky note. If you want to grab a sticky note and put something in the sticky note that maybe you learned that you didn't know before, or something you think that you knew but might be able to help make your meetings a bit better the next time you do them. It's always fun to use this to strategize. And you'll just click on it and you should be able to type right in the box. This is great. So yes, keep putting some stickies in there. And like I said, once you put the stick in, you should be able to click with your cursor to be able to then add data into the sticky note. And if you haven't used Whiteboard, I'll take just a moment here to let you know that you can see you can add reactions. You can also click on a particular sticky note and add a comment. And if you do want to move around the whiteboard, if you click on the hand will actually move the whiteboard, so it allows you to move to different spaces that you're working on. In addition, if you notice, if you click on the 3 dots just to the right of the circle and the square, there are templates that you can use to get you started if you want to do some brainstorming or you're product designing. You can also add images or links. You might want to add a link to a website or a report that was important. You can also add videos and even documents to the whiteboard. We didn't talk a lot about this, but you can use loop components too. And I see a few of you must have Copilot, because I love that someone just used Copilot to categorize all of these sticky notes. So if you do have Copilot, you'll see that you can ask Copilot to then categorize all of the sticky notes that have been put up on the board. It's a great way to summarize and finish up. Thank you for whoever did that. Raise your hand because we want to thank you for that. That's great. Well done. So Whiteboard itself is a great tool, especially if you all are not able to be in the meeting together. So if you have Copilot, a paid license, the easiest way to tell is to go to office.com in a web browser, and you'll be able to see whether or not you have something called a work web toggle. And I can show you what that looks like in just a moment. But thank you all for the activity here. I love all of the suggestions and thoughts. And in your next meeting, definitely think about using a live whiteboard. It can become really helpful. If you go to your office.com in a web browser, the quickest way to see if you have a Copilot, you would have a work web toggle. If you do not have this toggle, then you have the Copilot that comes with your Microsoft license. And of course, we can have more time on that. We have lots of blogs on it and on-demand content, webinars. Please definitely go check out our webpage, which we've already, we'll add another link to in case you don't have that. We've got some great videos on that. and can walk you through some of the things that you can and can't do. And a final note on Live Whiteboard, currently, if you're recording your Teams meeting, the work that you're doing in your Live Whiteboard will not be part of the recording. But Microsoft has promised it will soon be able to be recorded. So just keep that in mind if you happen to be having a good strategy session and you're recording it. The activity you're doing will not be recorded. But of course, you will have the end result of your whiteboard and all of the work that you did. That will always be available to you. It just won't be part of the actual recording. Now with that, Midhun's actually going to post a quick poll again. We'd love to hear which engagement tool do you use more often in your meetings? That's great. Yes, reactions are great. It's really helpful to know what people are thinking and if they agree. It's also good to make sure that if you haven't done this, that you set a little bit of ground rules around what your different reactions means. That's always sometimes helpful too, if it's not already known inside your organization. Oh, fantastic. So I'm glad to see quite a few use polls also. And some whiteboard in there too. So just a quick pro tip, some of you who are already using polls, you probably do this already. But of course, one of the things that I really enjoy is being able to add polls to the meeting before it even starts. And that I find that, really helpful, as now you do have to be the meeting organizer to do that. But that really helps when it comes to preparing, so that it's all ready to go and you can have them set up as drafts. So yes, you can, as the co-organizer, your organizer has to add the application to the meeting first. Then it will allow you to actually do it yourself.
If we go into current meeting, since I'm a co-organizer, I can actually add polls. I saw your question there, Maria, and yes, you can add polls if you're a co-organizer. So here I have the 2 launched polls and 1 in draft to launch later. The draft I created before the meeting, so I can be ready to launch the poll once required. It's a bit of a sneak peek, but here you go.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Midhun. That's great. And just to note, this is where you would add. So I've opened up an existing meeting, and there'll be an apps option icon. And when you click the apps icon, as long as the organizer has added polls to the meeting prior, once it was set up, then any co-organizers will be able to access those applications and set up polls ahead of time. So just keep that in mind. And you notice now it's in the meeting invite. I can now open up the polls application. And what's great is it will always give you suggestions of things if you're looking for inspiration. I can also look at previous polls that I have used in case you want to reuse something. You don't have to retype it. And of course, I could do a new poll. And as you can see, there's multiple different kinds if you haven't done them in the past. Your multiple choice, word cloud, a ranking, or a rating, or even a quick quiz. So keep that in mind as if you want to add polls to your next meeting as a way to engage your team. Okay, well, that's a little bit about preparing during your meeting, engagement during your meeting, and then we were going to kind of end and talk a little bit about meeting recap and things that you can do after the fact to help make sure that everything that you focused on in the meeting, everyone's able to follow up and remember what they did, so that if it's a quarterly meeting or a monthly meeting, maybe you have notes or recordings from that. So what I'll do is I'll show you a meeting recap, which I find really helpful, especially if it is a reoccurring meeting or it's something you're doing quarterly. So if I want to go back to last week's or the week before's meeting and make sure that I'm prepared for this meeting, If you have Teams Premium, this AI summary will be available to you. Otherwise, you'll be able to see the transcript, any app mentions that you were mentioned in the meeting, and you'll also be able to then see the video recording if it was recorded. And if it was recorded, it will also give you, who spoke and how much they spoke in the meeting. But this is a great way to catch up on a meeting. And another helpful hint, if you are invited to many meetings, and some of them you're not necessarily need to be active in, you actually just need to follow it and make sure that you get the information from the meeting. You could be invited to it, and then what you can do is you have an option to follow the meeting. That will ask the organizers and co-organizers of that meeting to record or transcribe it for you. And then that way, once the meeting's over, it will alert you that the transcript and or recording is ready for you to review. So that's a really helpful way to help manage some of your time if you're not able to actually attend for a specific reason and you really are there for the information versus being very active. So, and what's great again is if you happen to have these summaries or you took notes during your meeting, you're then able to copy those notes and you're able to send them out, especially if this was an external meeting. You might want to send everyone meeting notes of what was done. And if you happen to have the meeting summary AI, you can copy this, and it also will give you what it believes are follow-up tasks. But of course, if you don't have Teams Premium, that's okay. You can use that notes icon in your Teams meeting while it's happening. And you can either assign a specific person, or you can all together, and again, only access to internal people who organize the meeting, to allow them to add to those meeting notes and add those follow-up tasks real time. And then, of course, after the meeting, that gives you the opportunity then to share those meeting notes internally or externally, or both. The other thing that's always good to think about is, hybrid is really here to stay. So it's good to let people know if it's fully in person, you really want to make sure that you let everyone know this is an in-person meeting so they can plan their day accordingly. A lot of us are working from the office a few days a week and working from home. So you want to make sure that everyone's aware this is an in-person meeting so they can make sure that their schedule works with that. Or if it's a hybrid meeting, that also gives them that option to either be in the meeting and let them know what specific room that might be at. If they're all gathering, a certain amount of you are gathering together in a certain conference room. That way you're able to make sure that the room and the system and the audio and the mic and the speakers are all working properly. And a good suggestion is if you are all in the same room and you're not fortunate enough to have a Teams room, which is always amazing, a lot of times what we always recommend is bring your computer to the meeting, log into the meeting, but turn your camera and your microphone off, or at least minimally your microphone. And what that does is it allows for, as you are contributing, you will be shown on the Teams meeting. Of course, one of the things that's helpful now is the recognition setting that Midhood showed. So that may slowly pull us away from that, but it always is helpful that you're logged in so that anything that you can chat yourself, if you need to put something in the chat because it's hybrid, or if you want to contribute directly, that's a way that you're able to do that. So keep that in mind in addition. So that was a lot. I hope you guys are hanging in there. One of the things we wanted to ask you was, we've talked a lot about, Teams meetings, webinars, live meetings, town halls, and obviously there's a lot of detail in each one of those other meetings that we'd be happy to help you with if you're interested, but they are obviously for a larger audience. We did have one more poll we wanted to post, and we wanted to ask if for our next session, is there anything you'd like to hear more about? So we put up a couple of options. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are, what might be interesting to you. We can add that to our final webinar of the series. And this will be on November 12th. And I think I mentioned that a little earlier. And I believe Sandra has already added it to the chat, but we'll add it again just to make sure that you have that if you'd like to register early. And of course, Midhun, is there anything you would like to add? Any pro tips?
I think that will be for now. I think that my best tip was the voice recognition. That's really a game changer.
I have to agree, Midhun. That is fantastic. And it's just so new. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that after this meeting, it's definitely worth reviewing. And again, just as a reminder, it's just the 3 dots just to the left of your picture or your initials in the Teams main window, in the main application window. You'll be able to click on those 3 dots and go to settings. And once you go to settings, it's the last setting in the left-hand side. And that will then allow you then to open up and do both your voice and your face recognition.
3 dots, settings, and recognition.
And
As
you'll
you can see, you're
ahead.
currently in a meeting. To modify profile, please return after your meeting.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Midhun. That was really appreciate you doing that live for us. Is there any questions that anyone has? Please feel free, and we can always stay on for a few minutes if you have any other questions. You've had some great ones so far. We really appreciate the activity and engagement. If not, what I will let you know is you will be getting an email with this recording and any of the links that we've added here. So be on the lookout so you can always go back to the recording if there was something that you wanted to review or if you wanted to share it with any of your colleagues. So with that, if there's no other questions, I want to say thank you so much for your time today. We really enjoyed getting to spend the last hour with you. We hope to see you in session 3 and look out for that email. Hope to see you soon.
See you all. Thank you.